At MidAmerican Energy, we're one company serving 1.6 million people who all need energy that's available 24/7. That's why we work 24/7. That's why we make investments in our systems that make us more resilient to extreme weather. That's why we generate power from all available resources to cover the variables in supply and demand. And that's why when the power is knocked out, we work around the clock to restore power to you. MidAmerican Energy, obsessively, relentlessly at your service.
Welcome, everybody. Thanks for being here. I'm your moderator today. I'm Augie Bergstrom. I am the station manager over at a nonprofit in Marion, Iowa called the Monarch Research Project. And today we're going to talk about how you can green your home and yard, or in other words, what you can do at home to help the environment or in your backyard. I just want to mention our session today is sponsored by MidAmerican Energy. So thanks, MidAmerican, for helping us do this today. A few things before I introduce our panelists here. I want to remind everyone that please ask questions. But if you do so, use the chat function. I'll be checking that frequently, and we want your involvement. We'll have a better discussion if you do, so please get involved. And I should also note that this is recorded, so if you're looking back and want to see it later, it will be available. Okay, without further ado, we're joined by three panelists today. We've got Stan Lauberman. He is the Senior Housing Inspector for the City of Iowa City. We have Clint Ball, founder and executive director of a nonprofit in Cedar Rapids called Matthew 25. And then we have Casey Druell, who is the Water Resources Outreach Coordinator in Polk County, and also runs the RAIN campaign. So before we get into some of our questions and discussion here, I just wanted to give our moderators just a brief moment to maybe say hi and expand on what your title is or what exactly you do for work. So maybe we'll start with Stan.
Hey, yeah, thanks for having me. Stan Lauberman, Senior Housing Inspector for the City of Iowa City. Kind of a misnomer. I do a little bit more than inspect senior housing. With that title, everybody expects I'm out there hanging out with the elderly and making sure that nursing homes and other homes are safe, but that's not quite the case. I oversee the systematic rental inspection program for the City of Iowa City, and then also handle nuisance complaints related to the city. So nuisance complaints, tall grass and weeds, snow on sidewalks, cars parked in the wrong place. But yeah, mainly here today to talk about what we've done with tall grass and weeds, and also kind of changing the focus on turf grass to our provisions that allow for more natural areas and more native landscaping within the City of Iowa City.
All right, Casey.
All right, hi, it's Cassie. No
Cassie,
worries.
sorry.
Yeah, no worries. Cassie Druell. I am the Water Resources Outreach Coordinator for Polk County Public Works, and one of my jobs is to manage a special program that's funded by the county called the RAIN campaign, which is helping people understand how they can rainscape or landscape for soil and water health. And so I'll talk more about that as the panel questions get underway.
Thanks. And Clint?
Hey everyone, it's great to have you here. Looking forward to this conversation. I am the founder and executive director of Matthew 25. It's a nonprofit here in Cedar Rapids that really focuses on growing strong neighborhoods, and we do that with kind of 4 pillar areas of food, housing, education, and community building. So we do everything from helping people to fix up their homes to running rental properties, running an urban farm, a grocery store, a tool library, lots of things where we're helping people to kind of think about how they can improve their homes and their communities. So excited to be part of this.
Cool. So I wanted to start today with kind of defining what making your home greener means in a general sense. What's the broad goal of it? And I'm really curious how that definition changes with the different facets of work that you guys are in. So if you guys could go through and maybe say what it means to you.
Sure, I'll start. So From a housing code standpoint, we're always looking at energy efficiency for our homes, especially as homes age and we have the opportunity to replace systems that may be 10, 15, 20 years old. Right now, we're really looking at not just high efficiency furnaces and air conditioners, but moving along to a different technology of maybe air source heat pump, more electrification, just moving to something that has less of an impact on the environment. And then you get into systems that, windows and insulation and things that you can add as you remodel, or as you look to build a new home to maybe incorporate some newer technologies and higher efficiency insulation factors in that. And then as you expand out into your yard, how are we living and what do we really need in our yards? Do we really need to have large turf grass lawns? Are there ways to possibly use that land in a different way that captures the moisture and doesn't lead to more runoff into our streams? And yeah, that's one thing that I've really enjoyed over the past couple of years is kind of focusing on kind of flipping the script on what we allow for lawns in cities. And while we have certain things in our codes that have requirements and vision triangle issues and other safety factors of working within those parameters to allow people to do a lot of creative things in their yards within the city.
Cassie?
Yeah, some similar stuff to what Stan said. So over in central Iowa, we call landscaping your yard for soil and water health rainscaping because like Stan mentioned, the goal is to prevent stormwater runoff because there's a difference between rainwater and stormwater. Rainwater is falling out of the sky, and when it hits your property, it's relatively clean. However, if your yard is not soaking up that rainwater because maybe you have poorly drained soils or you have a lot of surfaces that can't absorb rainwater, that water is going to leave your property and then, enter the road where it picks up pollutants. And so that's what we call stormwater runoff. And so there's a lot of landscaping options out there for making your yard more like a sponge and less like an umbrella.
Mm. Yeah, I think that's really important. Just to kind of piggyback on a couple of things that both of you have said and kind of where Matthew 25 is, like the area where we work is a floodplain, right? That in 2008 had about 13 feet of water in most people's houses. And so water retention on site is really important to us so that it doesn't go into the river and cause major floods, that kind of thing. But so is biodiversity as part of greening our yards. I think we've all heard about the loss of pollinators and all of that and the loss of biodiversity and how that impacts everything from the health of occupants to the health of the applicants. So that's really important to us. And we are doing a net zero home build right now that's all electric with air source heat pumps and, highly energy efficient. So look forward to talking more about that too.
So I think we can jump and run with maybe the backyard first, what you can do outdoors to make these improvements and maybe just dive into some of the things that you guys have already briefly mentioned. So what are the main practices? Maybe Cassie, you can start this. What are the main practices that one can do to make a difference in their yard?
Sure. There's a variety of practices that are available, and when homeowners see a list, sometimes they can get a little overwhelmed, but you can kind of, before you start figuring out what kind of practice you want to do, you can talk about what your goals are for managing water on your property. If you have areas where you can't get grass to grow, or maybe you have some areas of standing water that you'd like to find a solution for, or if you're just, super green and want to just do your part for the environment, that can help you narrow down what types of practices are the best for your property. Also, the size of your property and the topography of your property or the way that your landscape, slopes, sometimes has an effect on what might work for your property as well. So one that's kind of universal for those who have a home with downspouts is to install a rain barrel. this is one of the simplest ways that you can prevent water from leaving your property because you're harvesting it from your roof and you're storing it for use later on your yard. And you can use it in the same manner that you use a garden hose for the most part. You can, water your gardens with it. You can wash your car. You can, wash off garden tools, fill your bird bath, that sort of thing. So it's a pretty simple thing you can do. And we sometimes call it the gateway practice because once you realize how much water you're collecting, you start thinking about other things you can do. So some people also want to, keep as much of their lawn as possible, but they still want to find a way to soak up more water. So there's a practice called soil quality restoration that involves taking an aerator and pulling really deep plugs out of your yard, usually 4 to 6 inches. And then you can top your yard with compost. And then those holes you created will allow the compost to sink in. And basically you are increasing the organic matter in your topsoil, and that can help your grass grow, and longer roots in the grass can help you soak up more water. And then finally, you can install native plants or plants that were native to Iowa before human settlement in areas maybe where you don't want to mow anymore or areas of your yard that you don't use. These plants are usually what you consider, prairie flowers and grasses, so kind of taller, but there are shorter varieties available too. And it can add aesthetic value to your home. You can, put in just a little bit or a lot, depending on what kind of look you're going for. And once again, they have super long roots that will soak up a lot of water when it rains on your property. And you can do this either, native plants alone, or you can do more engineered practices like rain gardens. So there's a variety of things out there for, different price levels and different goals.
And just going off that quick, you mentioned at the start there that there's several factors to go off of there: shape of the yard, drainage in the yard, soil type. Are there any programs where, or maybe Stan, you working for the city, this, is there anyone that would come out and help make recommendations in what projects you should pursue at home?
Right. So we don't have that in Iowa City. We do have funds for rain gardens. But when it comes to design, we would encourage you to reach out to a professional or a master gardener that was familiar with or capable of doing that for you.
Gotcha.
To piggyback on that, in Polk County, there are certain cities that have stormwater engineering technicians that will come out and do site visits. It just varies by community. But that is an option if you want to, call your city and see if there's someone available that does those types of visits. The state of Iowa, so the Department of Ag also has an urban conservation team. It's a small team, but sometimes they can do site visits as well to give you some guidance. But there's a lot of resources available online too to help you get started.
Yeah, just to add to that, I think we've made a lot of progress in this area in the last 15 years. Like when we started the urban farm at Matthew 25 in 2010, people looked at us like we were crazy, right? There were no urban ag ordinances, things like backyard chickens and bees and all of that were just like cutting edge. And over the years, we've seen that communities have really started embracing this way of planting and being. And so a lot of cities have started to get rid of the ordinances that made it illegal for people to grow food in their front yards, to grow native species in their front yards, all that kind of thing. But we need to keep pushing that forward, right? And the other thing that I think we need to keep working on is we can complain sometimes in urban areas about rural areas and use of chemicals and nitrates and runoffs and that kind of thing. But often in our urban areas, there's a lot of unregulated use of herbicides and fertilizers and all of that on lawns that just like people pour it on and think, oh, if a little's good, a lot's even better, right? And this whole practice of planting native species and getting rid of some of those chemicals and realizing that there's a whole diversity of beautiful plants that can grow in our front yards. And with a little bit of cultivation and work, like they can look beautiful and take a whole lot less work than having a lawn. and they don't need chemicals to look beautiful. They just do that naturally. So I think it's really important as we think about greening to kind of think about what we're putting into the soil.
Yeah, does someone want to expand a little bit on that? The reduction of maybe time and other resources when compared to grass, what implementing natives can help with?
Sure, I'll start. So yeah, like you mentioned, it adds beauty to your yard. But also you're saving time because you're not mowing that section of your yard anymore. You're saving money on fertilizers if you apply fertilizers to your lawn. Which another spin off real quick is that you should always look at the directions before you apply that to your yard. Like Clint mentioned, more is not better because the grass can only soak up so much, and then when it rains, that's just going to wash into your storm drains. So, but then also, I'm not a climate change expert or a carbon reduction expert, but I can say, with certain knowledge that, if you're not mowing, you're not putting as much, greenhouse gases into the air. And so that will help, on that front as well. And then you're adding, to the pollinator habitat too.
And just to note, and you're decreasing your water usage, right? A lot of people are
Yeah, you
using
don't have to water
sprinkler
your lawn.
systems.
Yeah.
A lot of those plants are drought resilient. Cassie, you mentioned rain gardens. I don't think we've quite delved into the difference between a rain garden and just planting natively. Do you want to touch on that?
Sure. So both practices are great for managing water. But I guess the difference is how much water each of them can soak up. Native landscaping on its own does exactly what it's supposed to do, how it's done it for thousands of years. It soaks up heavy rain. However, especially in urban environment, on properties that have been constructed, 80s to recently, there's a lot of mass grading going on and a lot of soil compaction. So the lawn is not going to absorb a whole lot of water. And so even if you plant a little bit of native landscaping, if you get a heavy rain, that native landscaping may not be able to soak up all of the water in time before it, rushes off your property anyway. So you can construct a rain garden, which is a strategically excavated bowl. So think of a bowl with a flat bottom in your yard. And from ground level, it kind of looks just like native plantings because what happens is you will end up digging out a bowl, taking that soil you dug out, mixing it with sand to make it a little more porous to mimic, not compacted soil. And then you would put that back into your bowl and then top that with some mulch and some native plants. And so basically that just adds a little bit more space for water to be stored and soak into the ground. And with rain gardens, some people might see, after a recent rain, the rain garden does have standing water in it, but it's designed to do that as long as the plants can drain it within 24 hours. So basically, you're just allowing that water to slowly percolate into the ground before it runs off your property.
We got a quick question. Clint, you mentioned herbicide use. Do any of you have recommendations on things will get into your yard? It happens that you don't want that could take over. Do you guys have any recommendations on how to do that in a more natural way, how to rid of those things?
Well, it kind of depends on the things that are getting in your yard, right? And so I think in some ways it's a mindset shift. Like we used to look at, burrowing animals that create little driveways across our lawn as these horrible, horrible things. Some people have begun to look at that as natural aeration that happens, right? And so how we look at those things is really important. And then, I think secondary to that is just being as natural as possible. Like there are a lot of organic fertilizers and using natural compost and those kinds of things are really important.
Great.
I think we touched on a little bit already about soil restoration. So if you can develop a media that whatever you're growing grows well. So in my case, did some work with that and also started mowing a little higher in the areas that I have turf grass. So as long as the turf grass is well established, it kind of crowds out any other weed that might be growing in there. Yeah, and just being very selective in the amount of herbicide that you're using. And, is it really that important to have, beautiful, monoculture, bluegrass or fine fescue? Maybe you do have a couple dandelions in there and just learning to live with it, quite frankly.
So we've talked about some of the things you can implement, and people might be wondering, are there options, programs that they can utilize at the county, city, or organization level to help them implement these things? I know, Cassie, you are on the RAIN campaign. You can dive into that, and Stan and Clint, if you guys have any programs or know of any city programs that allow people either monetarily or just with informational resources to get the job done.
Sure, I'll start off. So, like I mentioned at the beginning, the RAIN campaign is a Polk County funded campaign to make people aware of the different rebate programs that are available in cities in Polk County for implementing rainscaping practices. So, for example, certain communities would cover half the price of a rain garden up to $2,000 or up to a certain amount. Or maybe they would cover a rain barrel up to $75. And it varies by community. Each of these communities I can't remember who was the first one, but there were a few communities that started these rebates, and then several communities jumped on board to do the same thing because they saw it was effective. And the RAIN campaign is a website that resulted out of all of these programs. It's a one-stop shop for people to visit to learn more about these types of rainscaping practices, but then also quickly find their community's information about their rebate program. And then there's an application where they can apply for the funding assistance. It's always a pre-application so that they can get pre-approved before they purchase any materials for DIY projects or if they hire a contractor to do those projects. It's a really awesome program in all of the communities in Polk County. And I do know that several eastern Iowa counties have similar programs. And so I would encourage anyone who is thinking about doing some sort of rainscaping to check with their city to see if a program like that exists. Like I said, before any work is done, because you may end up saving quite a bit of money. And as far as guidance or site visits, like I said before, you might be able to check with your city if someone wants to come out and take a quick look and make recommendations for you as well.
I believe, Clint, you might know better, but I know the city of Cedar Rapids and Marion has that similar rebate program. I don't know about the county. Clint, are you aware of a county program?
I don't know if the county does. I do know, yeah, like you said, the city has them, especially for rain gardens. And one thing we haven't touched on here related to people's houses is permeable paving. They also give funding for permeable paving. So
Iowa City, we have funds for rain gardens, and then the county will do, there's funds available for soil restoration.
Just quick before we start to move topics slightly, I know we mentioned rainwater barrels. Are there any other very minor, simple things that people can do if they don't want to undergo a project like installing native habitat, rain garden, permeable pavement? Any tips there?
Sure. So if you aren't, looking to invest heavily into rainscaping your yard at this time, there are a couple different things that you can do to help keep that or keep the urban stormwater runoff to a minimum. So first and foremost, you can take a look at where your downspouts are pointing, because sometimes downspouts will be going right down your driveway. And then that does not give the opportunity for that water to soak into the ground. Instead, it's just going to roll right down your driveway and into the street. And so there's ways to turn your downspout so that it goes into a grassy area. Obviously, you want to make sure that's an area that you're not going to get, erosion, or an area that you're going to be walking in a whole lot, because it might get kind of squishy. But that is an easy thing you can do. Also, you can make sure that when you're mowing your lawn or raking your leaves, that you are keeping all of those lawn clippings and leaves out of the road. Make sure you put them, either contain them or blow them back into your yard, because there's nutrients in the grass, especially if you over fertilize, and also leaves that if it gets washed down the storm drain, that can have a negative effect on our waterways as well. So those are easy, free things that you can do to help keep our waterways healthier.
And just to tag off of that, I think also leaving your lawn clippings, leaving your leaves, that provides habitat for
Yep.
your small insects that might
Yeah.
be under there.
And it's its own fertilizer. You don't have to put as much on the ground in the spring.
And unless we have something to tag on there, Stan, I wanted to talk a little bit about rules and regulations. What should people be keeping in mind as they make these changes, especially if they're not having someone come out before they start doing this work? What are some of the big things that they need to keep in mind?
Sure. It all depends on location of your house in relation to street. Are you on the corner? Sometimes we get into vision triangle issues where we want to make sure that vehicles, as they're traveling on the street, are able to see around the corner to make sure another vehicle's coming. We also encourage community members to leave a buffer strip of about a foot between the street and the curb and the sidewalks, just because as people are walking down the sidewalks, we don't want them to have to deal with plants encroaching on that sidewalk. And again, you want to make sure that you're not planting anything that's limiting the vision to your house, so that if rescue personnel were trying to find your house, they might be blocked by certain plantings. So it's amazing how tall sunflowers can get and how proficient they can be in the front yard when planted. But other than that, we kind of flipped the script here in Iowa City. We always had provision, not always, a long time, predating me, and I've been here 20 some years, that allowed for native plantings. And what we've done in the past couple years is kind of flip the script on that and not lead in our spring advertising of, hey, you have to keep your lawns under 10 inches tall. We lead now with, hey, you're allowed to have native plantings, natural landscapes. And oh, by the way, if you do have a turf grass lawn, you do have to keep it under 10 inches tall. So I think really something as simple as that, of just putting that idea in people's head that, yeah, this is acceptable. You can do this. And we have allowed for it, really changes how people approach it and look at it.
Yeah, I think at least I get a lot of people irritated with neighbors that are giving them grief, calling the city on them. Is there any tips to kind of mark?
Yeah, I mean, with anything, good communication with your neighbors, that people understand that what you're doing is intentional. There will be times that neighbors will disagree with it, but it is your property. You are allowed to, cultivate it as you choose, as long as you're not encumbering or endangering those around you. And most of the time, it becomes a matter of conversation between neighbors, and everybody understands that, no, I'm not just, leaving the long for the pollinators in May, and no, I'm looking to do this intentionally throughout the year. And usually we have pretty good luck with people understanding what they're up against and what they're trying to do. There's from time to time with anything, you have a neighbor dispute where people don't agree, and it's a change, and we work through it.
Right.
I'd like to add to that a little bit too. There are ways to make your native plantings look more intentional and garden-like. Like Stan mentioned, mowing a buffer of turf grass around it is one way. You can also do like landscaping pavers or stones around your planting so that people understand it's supposed to be there. And you can also buy what we call plugs. So like first year native plants that you can intentionally clump together in a garden-like setting. And so when they come up, they will look more uniform and more of the traditional garden that a lot of people are more familiar with.
That jogged a memory here. So when you're putting in natives, putting in a rain garden or any sort of even prairie, you're more than likely in your backyard converting grass to these things. What is the best methodology for doing that appropriately, getting rid of your turf?
I don't really know if there's a best method, but there's definitely a few different ones out there. I've heard that laying down cardboard for a few weeks is effective because it blocks the sunlight, or plastic bags, but then, you have to make sure that they don't blow away. Um, Also, sometimes we don't like to talk about chemicals, but sometimes chemicals have their place when you need to, have a fresh slate to start your natives. Maybe you could do that one round. Or you can dig up your sod and then just start that way too.
And how about for people who are renting, don't own a home? It might be a little bit more difficult for them to actively engage in making their space greener. You guys have any things that they could be doing before they're owning a home?
I think it's important for them to talk to their landlord, right? But I think there are getting to be more and more landlords. Like as a landlord, Matthew 25 works with other landlords to do some of this on our own properties and then use it as a demonstration for other landlords. And there are getting to be a few in town that realize that they can actually lower their maintenance costs and have a more attractive curb appeal if they go this route as opposed to what they've done in the past.
Okay.
Yeah. And on the HOA front too, I've talked to a lot of HOA members who say that their HOA prohibits them from planting, things that are more non-traditional. And I've also had some success stories with HOAs where, a bunch of neighbors talked about it together, they band together, and then they, change their policies. So I don't think that that has to limit anyone.
All right. Well, that's all I have on the backyard. Is there anything you guys want to comment on before we move on to the actual housing?
I will just plug if you are interested in learning more, there's plenty on the internet, but if you are interested in learning more about the RAIN campaign, if you're in central Iowa, it's raincampaign.org. Also, there's a state website to learn more about urban conservation practices and rainscaping. It's cleanwateriowa.org. And that one's run by the state.
Yeah, I would
Awesome.
plug our Iowa City Lawn Love series. So if you search on YouTube for Iowa City Lawn Love, gives you a great example of what amazing things that community members have been doing with their yards. And you start with people that have been doing it for years and other people that have just started small and kind of expanded out. But yeah, it just gives a great example of what's possible.
Okay. So I think Stan and Clint, you both mentioned some improvements that you guys pay attention to when we're talking about improving a home. Can you guys reiterate and maybe dive into a few of the major ones that have the best effect?
Sure, go ahead.
I get to go first. Great. So I'll speak anecdotally from myself. I live in an older home, 1936, and obviously, as senior housing inspector, I'm kind of involved in this whole housing thing and affordable housing, and had the opportunity to do a few things in my own home to try and improve energy efficiency. I put solar on my roof because I was interested to see, what sort of benefit I would get from that. I was also at a time where we upgraded our HVAC equipment, and while I didn't go air sourced heat pump just because it was 2 years ahead of the curve there, it's just amazing what you see from going from older, 20, 30-year-old technology in HVAC to modern technology and higher efficiency, the improvements that you see. Solar, I'm cautiously optimistic that it'll pay off for me in the end. There's a huge upfront cost, and while we were able to finance it at an affordable rate at a time that it made sense, again, that the payoff is 10, 12 years out, and hopefully I don't have a lot of maintenance costs associated with that. But overall, the investment that we made in our house, we saw a better return on the HVAC equipment. Be interesting to see if I could have made that jump to air source heat pump, how much more I could have saved in there. And then you get into other components of the house. We're still looking at original windows. We're in the process of making the change to go to a more energy efficient window and see what that would do for us. But yeah, I mean, there's always incremental changes that you can make to improve the energy efficiency of your house. Smart thermostats are another easy way to go. Maybe raising that temperature degrees on the dial for air conditioning a couple of degrees and learning to be more comfortable at a higher temp. Yeah, I don't think you have to go all in. You can make incredible changes with just small amounts over time.
Yeah, I would agree with that. So just by way of background, Matthew 25, we've had a Green Iowa AmeriCorps team that does energy audits. So we've done a few hundred different energy audits on older homes. I also own my own 1940s home, and I've done a lot of these things that are being talked about. And then most of the rental properties that we own were built in the early to mid 1900s. So we've done a lot with them. I think the important thing to know is that the smallest things often have the biggest return, right? And so just bringing somebody in to do an energy audit, look at your overall building envelope. What is the air infiltration that's happening? If they do a blower door test, they will quickly see that like your windows are leaking. It's leaking around the edges of your windows. Often people have horrible insulation around their doors, and there's breezes blowing in under doors. Places where people have plug-ins often aren't insulated, and so the air is blowing in from outside. So just doing some basic caulking tactics can lower your energy costs dramatically. It's amazing how many houses we go into where people have basements that are only partly conditioned, and they have ductwork that has holes in it, isn't taped, is kind of starting to fall apart, and there's using all kinds of resources to heat places that don't really need to be heated. So making sure that we're checking up on those things. Lighting and those things that suck up a lot of energy, right? Like everybody at this point should have all LED lighting. Like it's just so much cheaper, and you can get it any place on the light spectrum you want so that you can have the feel that you want. And it's relatively easy to change those things out. Low flow faucets are another great savings place. You'll still feel like you're getting clean from your shower and all of that. I think those are the kind of base level, right? And then from there you go into insulation. Where do we add insulation? Window replacement, the solar, those kinds of things that are the bigger cost items really start to make sense.
Sure. How about programs, rebates? We talked about that with some of the outdoor stuff. Is there any program that can help people do this monetarily? Is there any city program, county program?
Yeah, so in Iowa City, our sustainability division works with community members to electrify their homes, prepare for EVs. So there's, an expense associated with that. So yes, air source heat pumps, again, there's grants and rebates through our sustainability program that will help with that. Moderate to low income homeowners also have access to CDBG and home funds. And while we're doing that, we're also utilizing Green AmeriCorps or someone else to do a blower door test to see what we have for air infiltration in the homes. And we're always encouraging homeowners to make that next jump and to consider energy efficiency when they're replacing any of their HVAC equipment.
Right now is kind of the golden era in some ways for energy efficiency, right? On the federal level, there are federal tax credits for things like solar and heat pumps and that kind of thing that really help out. I will say, The flip side is that there used to be really robust programs from our local energy providers, but those kind of got gutted in the last decade, and so there's not near as much just on the energy sector level as there used to be. So that's something long term we need to keep working on.
We've got a quick question here. We'll stray away from housing for a moment. I did a no-mow May and my turf grass got to 18 inches tall. What should I do differently next year?
I'll start with this one. I'm not a fan of no-mow May. Kind of looking at it, your turf grass gets to 18 inches tall. You're only supposed to cut a third of that off to keep healthy turf grass. So as you bring that back into compliance after no-mow May, you really stress that grass and probably aren't doing a lot to help in that situation. So I think no-mow May can be used appropriately if you're looking to see what is naturally coming up in your yard, and you use no-mow May to kind of get an idea of what's happening, and go beyond no-mow May after that. But the whole practice of letting the grass grow long in May, I think overall really hurts your turf grass more than you're doing to help the environment.
I'll piggyback on that. I was kind of the guinea pig for this. I was all in on no-mow May and did it in my yard, and then was thinking, we're going to like expand this to all of our rental properties and everything if it went well in my own yard. And it was horrible. It was like we allowed it to grow, and then, like he was saying, it totally destroyed our turf grass, let all the weeds take off and really get established. And then by the time we were done and had mowed everything down, there was nothing but weeds left. And so spent the next 2 years in those places where we wanted grass, trying to get the grass to come back and all of that. So I'm much bigger fan of like deliberate transition than no-mow May.
I'm going to echo that. The same.
Yeah. So I think Stan was saying earlier, you do want to let it go a bit. You want to mow a little higher, but you still would want to mow.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah, if you leave it a little higher, that allows the roots to actually grow a little deeper too. And so you are getting better stormwater management if you keep your grass a little higher. But like you had mentioned before, especially most lawns have Kentucky bluegrass on them, which isn't even an Iowa native species. And so you're not going to attract Iowa native pollinators to use that as a food source most of the time.
So a lot of mowers don't go very high, especially just the ones you have for a small yard. Is there a height that you would recommend that you can still manage with maybe a smaller mower? Like when you say let it go a little bit, how many inches are you guys thinking?
I don't know if I have an answer for that.
I don't have an answer for that. Whatever my setting is, I'm not at the top setting, but I'm probably the next one down, and that's it. So yeah.
So a few inches.
Yes, absolutely. 3-4 inches, maybe probably taller than that, probably pushing 5, honestly.
Yeah, probably 4 to 6, I would say,
Yeah.
is kind of that
Gotcha.
sweet spot. And that depends, in part on the time of year, right? Like it's easier to let it go long in the spring and the fall.
Right.
We have a comment from Linda. She says, Iowa City Lawn Love on YouTube is wonderful. So everybody make sure you go check
Thank
that
you.
out afterwards.
Yeah. Our communications department did a great job with that. We had some great resources and talent to work with, but yes, we were very happy with it.
I had one more note here. Are there any municipal tips and tricks that you guys would recommend? Composting, cans, anything that is different than just trash and recycling? Maybe outside of your realm.
I can't think of anything.
I know here, I don't know how it works in other cities, but here we have the can shed. So separating your cans and taking those separately to get those recycled, I think is probably super helpful. just to have a higher quality of recycling instead of having everything mixed in.
I do know some cities offer free mulch to folks too, from trees that they chop down, which, saves money to not buy it from the store, but also it's not going to have those, dyes and stuff in it that are, a little less healthy for our environment. So that might be one way.
I'm not sure if you guys have anything to talk about here, but Cassie just mentioned trees. We haven't talked about planting trees in your yard. Is there great benefit to doing that for soil, water absorption, ecological benefits? Anything
Shade
about that?
benefits to, having them, so that's one of the greatest ways to cut down your energy costs, right? Is if you have a good shade tree and plant it in the right space to shade you during the summer. It's good.
And they also have long roots, just like native prairie plants that can soak up a lot of storm water too. So it's never a bad idea to plant a tree.
Augie, you probably know more about this than all of us. I mean, Monarch research project's about to hit their 100,000th tree they've planted in Cedar Rapids or Lynn County since the derecho in 2020. So,
yep, we're about at the 95,000 tree mark. So if there's any landowners here in Lynn County that want trees, we do a distribution every fall, and they're about $25 a pop. We buy them in a huge quantities, so they're about the cheapest but still healthy trees you can find.
And all native trees, right? Like
all native. That is a good point to bring up. Yes, they are all native. A large majority of them are oaks. We actually require, if you're purchasing trees from us, one of them does have to be an oak. We're trying to sort of battle this maple dominance that we have in Lynn County and all over Iowa. We've got a question here. Any experience with adding clover to a lawn opposed to just having bluegrass?
I don't have any direct experience. I did attend a program recently that the zoo in Des Moines put on about what they call pollinator lawns or bee lawns. And it definitely has benefits. Similar to the prairie, you can attract some, native pollinator species, and you don't have to mow as often because a lot of those clovers and other native ground cover species don't grow as fast. However, they look aesthetically different, and so it takes a little bit of, neighbor talk as well. And it does take some initial management at first to get that established, similar to with native plants, you would have to do something to remove your existing turf if you want to go that route. Or you can also kind of incorporate it into your turf with a little more work. That's all I know.
Yeah, we've used clover at the urban farm that we run as a cover crop, and planted it on our walkways in between fields and that kind of thing. And it's kind of cool. Like you can, if you bend down and look at it at eye level, like you can just see all these bees, small native bees and that kind of thing that are just blanketing it at certain times of the year. It's beautiful. The flip side of that is it's not going to have the thickness that a lot of people are used to with their lawns. So you're not going to necessarily walk out there year round and just feel like your toes are on this carpet or something, And so it's good sometimes to start these things in small areas and see how you like it and then start to spread it.
Yeah, I think that's the best point with all of this. You don't have to have this idea, it's all or nothing. We've seen some of our best successes where people started out small, started a smaller pollinator garden, and then just slowly over time let it encroach out into their main turf grass lawn. And yeah, while once it's established, it may be a little easier to take care of. There is a fair amount of work to getting some of these native plantings to take root and take a hold and keep the weeds out. So like anything, and starting in moderation probably is a good thing.
Okay. Kind of looking big picture here, I just wanted to ask, are there any problems or roadblocks that cities or communities face in a large sense when they're trying to become greener, like community-wide issues that prevent Iowa from getting greener quicker? lack of funding, lack of a knowledge base in the community, city or county ordinances, anything that people can try to support or advocate for to improve at a community level?
I would say all of the above. Um, every city that I work with has a different idea of the different types of rainscaping practices that they allow and don't allow. And so that limits some folks sometimes. Also, there is usually limited funding available. I don't know of a community that's actually ran out of their rebate money yet, but I could see that potentially happening if everyone gets on board with this, but that's not a bad problem to have. Some people I know, a limiting factor for them to participate is that it is a rebate and not fully covered. So I would hope that in the future, as more of these practices become supported, that there's funding mechanisms out there for lower income individuals to get these, funded at 100%, or a way that, more people have access to these sorts of things.
And then sort of my last question here, and there might not be a good answer to this, but what is the larger aim, the end goal? What would be success in terms of creating greener communities? Maybe that's never ending. Maybe we can always improve, but.
From the stormwater side, obviously, we want to see a reduction in urban flooding. And also from the both urban and rural side, we want to see a reduction in excess nutrients that are flowing into our waterways that can, harm aquatic life and also harm our drinking water sources. So I can't remember if it was Stan or Clint that mentioned, a lot of these are small changes, but they can make a big difference, especially if, as a collective, we take the initiative to do it, and we can start small and we can, get bigger from there. And that's the only way that we can, really make a dent in this. It's not just one person's responsibility, it's everyone's.
Yeah, I think we live in a state where people are so deeply invested and in love with the native landscape, right? And people love being outdoors. They love gathering as a community under trees and that kind of thing. And so, to me, what's important in this whole conversation is that what we're trying to do is enhance the beauty of the place where we live, make it more resilient, make it so that we can grow things and live here for a long, long time into the future. And sometimes this all becomes so political and like we go to war over these issues, right? And I think there is a reasoned middle path that is going to make everybody's lives better if we just kind of start to move in this direction, see what works, try things out, and just like Stan was saying, moderation is a good way to start and then grow from there. So if there's an ordinance or whatever in your local community that's not working, don't be afraid to push on that, but just do it in a fair, open-minded way. It's my encouragement.
Great.
Yeah, I think a lot of times people kind of prickle at that word of sustainability and what that means, and kind of resilient communities. I think those have all been issues that have been touched on today. But, once you start diving into what that actually means, a resilient community or a sustainable community, there's a lot of things that no matter what side of you are in the political spectrum, you're like, yeah, I agree on that. This is important to us. And we want safe, healthy communities, and how we get there. We might differ and we might talk about it in different ways, but at the same point, we're all kind of moving in that same direction.
Awesome. Well, if you guys have any last comments, things we didn't touch on, if the audience has any last minute questions to throw in, we'll do that now. Otherwise, we'll wrap it. Any last shout outs, resources people should check out, or maybe just a reminder of things you've already said, in terms of websites, resources?
Nope.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks for our panelists for participating. Thanks for everybody for coming in and listening. It was fun.
Thanks.
Thank
For
you.
having me.
Thank you.